The arena went completely black. Not the kind of darkness you expect during a typical WWE entrance, but an absolute void that seemed to swallow every light in the building. 30,000 fans at the Allstate Arena in Chicago fell silent, their collective breath held in anticipation of something they couldn't quite name. The date was November 29th, 2025, and Survival Series had already delivered 3 hours of chaos, but nothing could prepare the wrestling world for what was about to unfold. Brock Lesnar stood in the center of the ring, championship gold draped over his massive shoulder, his chest heaving from the brutal match he'd just survived against Gunther. The Austrian had pushed the Beast Incarnate to limits not seen in years, but ultimately, Lesnar had done what Lesnar does. He conquered. Paul Heyman clutched the microphone with trembling hands, preparing to deliver what would surely be another legendary promo about his client's dominance. The advocate's mouth opened, and then every screen in the arena exploded with a symbol that hadn't been seen in professional wrestling for 8 long months. The Bloodline logo. But different. Darker. More menacing. What followed wasn't just an entrance. It was a reckoning. The thunderous boom of Head of the Table shattered the silence like a gunshot, and when the lights returned, Roman Reigns stood at the top of the ramp, transformed. Gone was the carefully groomed tribal chief who had dominated WWE for over 1,300 days. In his place stood something primal, something dangerous. His hair hung loose and wild, his beard grown thick and untamed. But it was his eyes that told the real story, burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the television screens of millions watching worldwide. The wrestling world had been spinning theories for months about where Roman had gone after WrestleMania 41. Some said he'd walked away from the business entirely, frustrated by the company's direction. Others whispered about health issues, family emergencies, or contractual disputes. The truth, as it turned out, was far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. Roman Reigns hadn't disappeared. He'd been watching, waiting, and most importantly, planning. Heyman's face drained of color faster than blood from a stone. The advocate who had stood by Roman's side for years, who had proclaimed himself a Paul Heyman guy long before he became a Roman Reigns guy, now found himself frozen between two monsters. Brock turned to his advocate with a look that could melt steel, demanding answers without saying a word. But Heyman had no answers to give. His mouth worked silently, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Because how do you explain the unexplainable? Roman descended the ramp with the measured pace of a man who owned not just the moment, but time itself. Each step echoed through the arena like a death knell. Fans who had chanted, "We want Roman," for months now found themselves genuinely uncertain whether they should cheer or run for the exits. This wasn't the Roman they remembered. This was something evolved, something that had shed the last remnants of Shield brotherhood and corporate champion. This was the final form of a man who had already conquered everything wrestling had to offer and had come back hungry for more. The stare-down at ringside lasted an eternity, compressed into seconds. Brock Lesnar, the man who had destroyed everyone from Undertaker to John Cena, looked across the ring at Roman Reigns, and for the first time in perhaps his entire career, hesitation flickered across his features. Not fear. Brock Lesnar doesn't do fear, but recognition. Recognition that the man standing opposite him wasn't the same wrestler he'd battled countless times before. This was an apex predator facing another apex predator, and the entire food chain was about to be rewritten. What happened next rewrote the very definition of destruction in professional wrestling. Roman didn't slide into the ring. He exploded into it. The Superman punch that connected with Lesnar's jaw carried 8 months of pent-up rage, strategy, and purpose. The sound it made, that sickening crack of fist meeting bone, caused the front row to collectively wince. But Roman wasn't done. Not even close. The spear that followed didn't just take Lesnar down, it drove him through the canvas with such force that the ring itself seemed to buckle. Heyman stood paralyzed in the corner, watching his current client being systematically dismantled by his former client. The advocate's famous verbal gymnastics had completely abandoned him. He clutched the championship belt that Lesnar had dropped, holding it like a shield against what was rapidly becoming apparent. This wasn't a fight, it wasn't even a beating. This was a statement being written in violence, and Heyman was about to be forced to read it aloud. The referee tried to intervene, performing his duties with all the effectiveness of a butterfly trying to stop a hurricane. Roman shoved him aside without even looking, his focus laser-locked on Lesnar. Another Superman punch. Another devastating spear. The Beast Incarnate, who had made a career out of being unstoppable, found himself very much stopped. His body lay sprawled across the broken ring, chest rising and falling in ragged gasps, while Roman stood over him like a conquering general surveying a defeated kingdom. Then came the twist that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw coming. The lights cut again, but this time when they returned, Roman wasn't alone. The Usos emerged from the crowd, followed by Solo Sikoa, and behind them, the imposing figure of Jacob Fatu. The bloodline had been fractured, shattered by internal conflict and Roman's absence. Or so everyone thought. The synchronized movement of these men, the way they surrounded the ring in perfect formation, told a different story entirely. This hadn't been a family torn apart. This had been a family lying in wait. But the real earthquake hit when Paul Heyman walked to the center of the ring, looked directly into the hard camera, and with a smile that could only be described as diabolical, raised Roman's hand high above his head. "Ladies and gentlemen," he proclaimed, his voice steady and strong now, "my name is Paul Heyman, and I have always been a Roman Reigns guy." The championship belt that had belonged to Lesnar moments ago now rested on Heyman's shoulder as he stood beside the real tribal chief. Social media didn't just break. It shattered into a million pieces. Twitter trends exploded with variations of Roman returns, Heyman betrayal, and most tellingly, "We were worked." Because that's exactly what had happened. The entire wrestling world, from casual fans to industry insiders, had been played like a fiddle for 8 months. The apparent dissolution of the bloodline, Heyman's alliance with Lesnar, Roman's mysterious absence, it had all been theater within theater. A long game so intricate that even the smartest fans had missed every clue. Wrestling journalists scrambled to update their websites, their carefully crafted predictions and insider reports now completely worthless. Message boards lit up with fans dissecting every moment of the past 8 months, searching for clues they'd missed. Had there been signs? Hidden messages in promos? Cryptic social media posts? The answer, frustratingly and brilliantly, was yes. They'd all been there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone smart enough to connect the dots. Nobody had. Brock Lesnar finally pulled himself to his feet, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, and for a moment, just a moment, it looked like the Beast might mount a comeback. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Could Lesnar overcome these odds? Could he fight his way through the bloodline? The answer came swiftly and brutally, no. The Usos hit him with a double superkick that echoed through the arena like a gunshot. Solo Sikoa followed with a spinning solo that made Lesnar's previous damage look like a warm-up. Jacob Fatu's moonsault, all 300 pounds of Samoan muscle flying through the air, was the exclamation point on a sentence written in carnage. Roman stood in the center of his family, his bloodline, looking not tired but energized. His chest wasn't heaving from exertion. He was feeding off this moment, drawing power from the chaos swirling around him. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the roar of the confused and electrified crowd like a knife through butter. "I never left," he said simply, each word deliberate and heavy with meaning. "I was always here. And now you're going to acknowledge me all over again." The following Monday Night Raw opened not with pyrotechnics or a pumped-up crowd, but with a 20-minute documentary that WWE had somehow produced overnight. The production values were cinema quality, the editing crisp and purposeful, and the story it told rewrote everything fans thought they knew about the past 8 months. What emerged was a narrative so complex, so carefully constructed, that it made Ocean's 11 look like a child's game of checkers. April 2025. WrestleMania 41 had just concluded with Roman Reigns losing the undisputed championship in what was supposed to be the end of his record-breaking reign. Backstage footage, never before seen, showed Roman in a private meeting with Triple H, Vince McMahon appearing via video call, and, surprisingly, Paul Heyman. The audio was crystal clear. "We need to make them forget," Roman said, his voice calm and measured. "We need to make them think it's over, that I'm done, that the bloodline is finished. And then, when they're not looking, when they think they've moved on, we strike." The camera work on this documentary was deliberate, artistic even. It showed Roman training in unmarked gyms across the world, his beard growing longer with each passing week. It captured Paul Heyman meeting secretly with Brock Lesnar in a dimly lit parking garage, the two men shaking hands in what now appeared to be a devil's bargain. Every promo Heyman had cut about Lesnar, every passionate defense of the Beast Incarnate, had been scripted not by WWE's creative team, but by Roman himself. The advocate hadn't betrayed anyone. He'd been playing the longest game in professional wrestling history. Solo Sikoa's apparent rebellion against Roman? Staged. The Usos' journey to find their own path. Carefully choreographed. Jacob Fatu's arrival in WWE and his seemingly random alignment with Solo? All part of a master plan that had been 8 months in the making. The documentary showed text messages between the family members, coded and cryptic, discussing everything from match finishes to social media posts. Nothing had been left to chance. Every tweet, every Instagram story, every insider report about backstage tension had been carefully planted information designed to misdirect and deceive. Wrestling podcasters who prided themselves on their inside sources found themselves scrambling to explain how they'd missed this. Dave Meltzer, the industry's most respected journalist, admitted on Wrestling Observer Radio that he'd been completely worked for the first time in decades. "I had sources telling me Roman was done," he said, his voice a mixture of frustration and admiration. "I had people I trust saying the bloodline was finished. And it turns out those sources were feeding me exactly what they wanted me to hear." The revelation sent shockwaves through the wrestling journalism community. If Roman and company could work the reporters, what else might they be capable of? The documentary revealed something even more shocking. Brock Lesnar had known. Not everything, but enough. The Beast Incarnate had agreed to be the final boss in Roman's elaborate game, understanding that taking this beating would elevate both men to a level of storytelling rarely achieved in professional wrestling. Footage showed Lesnar and Roman meeting in a private gym just 2 weeks before Survival Series, choreographing not moves but moments, beats, emotional peaks and valleys designed to create the perfect storm of shock and awe. Brock's only condition? "Make it look real," he'd said, his voice gravelly and serious. "Don't hold back. Give them something they'll never forget." Social media's reaction to these revelations was unprecedented. Hashtags like "worked by Reigns" and "bloodline conspiracy" trended worldwide for 3 consecutive days. YouTube was flooded with breakdown videos, fans rewatching old promos looking for clues, creating elaborate conspiracy boards that would make detectives jealous. The most popular video, titled "Every Clue We Missed About Roman's Return," had garnered 12 million views in 48 hours. Comment sections became philosophical battlegrounds about the nature of storytelling, the ethics of working fans, and whether this level of deception was genius or manipulation. But while fans debated online, something else was happening in arenas across America. Ticket sales for WWE events skyrocketed. The next Monday Night Raw sold out in 17 minutes. SmackDown tapings that had been running at 70% capacity were now turning away thousands at the door. Roman Reigns had done what every promoter dreams of. He'd made wrestling matter again. Not just to the hardcore fans who never stopped caring, but to the casual viewers, the lapsed fans, the people who had drifted away over the years. They all came flooding back, desperate to see what would happen next. The returning ratings told an even more compelling story. Raw's viewership jumped from 1.8 million to 4.2 million in 1 week, numbers not seen since the Attitude Era. SmackDown's Friday night broadcast became the most-watched show on network television, beating out established sitcoms and reality shows that had dominated the airwaves for years. Advertisers who had written off wrestling as a niche product suddenly came calling with offers that made WWE's stock price jump 23% in a single trading day. Roman Reigns wasn't just a wrestler anymore. He was a cultural phenomenon, a topic of conversation at water coolers and dinner tables across America. Critics had their say too, of course. Some accused WWE of being dishonest with their audience, of breaking the unspoken contract between performer and fan. Opinion pieces appeared in major publications questioning whether this kind of long-term deception was healthy for the industry. A writer for The Atlantic penned a scathing piece titled, "When Wrestling Stops Being Entertainment and Becomes Manipulation," arguing that fans deserve truth in their escapism. The article sparked debates on news networks, with talking heads who'd never watched a wrestling match suddenly having strong opinions about storytelling ethics in sports entertainment. Roman's response to the criticism was quintessentially him. He didn't respond. At least not directly. Instead, during his first promo after Survival Series, he addressed the camera with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable to watch. "You wanted real," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You wanted something that made you feel. You wanted to be surprised, shocked, invested. I gave you all of that. And now you're mad because I was too good at it? You're mad because you couldn't see it coming? That's not my problem. That's yours. I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make you acknowledge me." The promo went viral, clips shared across platforms by people who'd never watched wrestling. Sports shows played it, analyzing his delivery, his confidence, his complete lack of apology. Psychologists wrote articles about the parasocial relationships between performers and audiences, using Roman as a case study in manipulating emotional investment. Marketing experts studied his strategy, teaching courses on long-term brand development using the Bloodline's comeback as primary source material. Roman Reigns had transcended wrestling and become something larger, a symbol of meticulous planning and flawless execution in an age of instant gratification. Behind the scenes, the locker room had mixed reactions. Veterans like Randy Orton and AJ Styles publicly praised the storyline, calling it some of the best long-term booking they'd ever seen. Younger wrestlers studied it like sacred text, trying to understand how to create that level of investment. But there was also resentment. Some felt Roman had been given preferential treatment, that no other wrestler would have been allowed to disappear for 8 months and return to instant main event status. Others worried that this set a dangerous precedent, that WWE would now expect every storyline to be this intricate, this time-consuming, without understanding that Roman's unique position and talent made this particular story possible. The numbers didn't lie, though. Merchandise sales for Bloodline-related items increased by 400% in 2 weeks. Roman's "Acknowledge Me" t-shirt became the fastest-selling wrestling shirt in WWE history, outselling even Stone Cold Steve Austin's classic Austin 316 design during its peak. The championship belt that Roman hadn't even officially won, yet was being replicated by toy manufacturers working overtime to meet demand. Children showed up to schools wearing Bloodline face paint. Adults incorporated Roman's catchphrases into everyday conversation. The cultural penetration was complete. Yet beneath all the commercial success, beneath the trending hashtags and viral clips, a darker question lingered. What happens when you've pulled off the perfect con? Where do you go when you've reached the pinnacle of long-term storytelling? Roman had set a bar so high that anything following would feel like a disappointment. He'd created expectations that might be impossible to meet. And most dangerously, he'd proven that the wrestling audience could be worked at levels previously thought impossible. Every future storyline would now be viewed through a lens of suspicion, fans constantly wondering if what they were seeing was real or just another layer in an even deeper conspiracy. The wrestling world would soon discover that Roman Reigns had already thought about that problem, and his solution would shake the industry to its very foundations. 3 weeks after Survival Series, WWE announced a special event that would air on a random Tuesday night, Tribal Court. The concept was simple but loaded with implications. Roman Reigns would sit in judgment over the entire WWE roster, determining who deserved to remain in his kingdom and who would be cast out. The announcement was met with confusion and intrigue in equal measure. Was this a work? A shoot? Something in between? After what Roman had pulled off, nobody trusted their own judgment anymore. The night arrived with an atmosphere unlike anything WWE had produced before. The arena was transformed. Gone were the typical bright lights and flashy graphics. In their place, a throne room aesthetic straight out of a Godfather film. Roman sat elevated above everyone else, the Usos flanking him like armed guards. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu stood at the base of the stairs leading to the throne, human walls between the tribal chief and anyone foolish enough to challenge him. Paul Heyman stood at a podium to Roman's right, playing the role of chief prosecutor and defense attorney simultaneously, depending on what served his client's interests. One by one, WWE's top stars were called before the tribal chief. Cody Rhodes, the man who had ended Roman's original reign, walked out first. The tension was suffocating. Cody had spent months building WWE around himself as the face of the company, the hero who had slain the dragon. But dragons, it seemed, didn't stay dead. Roman looked down at Cody with something between pity and contempt. "You thought beating me made you special," Roman said, his voice echoing through the silent arena. "You thought one win erased everything I built. But look where we are now, Cody. I'm on a throne, and you're on your knees." Cody's response was measured but firm. He acknowledged Roman's accomplishments, his mastery of the business, but refused to bow. "You can sit on all the thrones you want," Cody said, his voice steady. "But that doesn't make you a king. It just makes you a man sitting in a chair." The crowd erupted. This was the confrontation everyone had been waiting for since Roman's return. The two men stared at each other, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. Roman smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something nobody else did. Seth Rollins came next, Roman's former Shield brother turned bitter rival. The history between these men could fill volumes. Championships, betrayals, alliances, and warfare spanning over a decade. Seth stood before the throne with his characteristic defiance, unwilling to play Roman's game. "This is ridiculous," Seth said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've turned into everything you used to hate. A egomaniac playing dress-up while the real work gets done by everyone else." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Roman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Always calculation. "The real work," Roman repeated slowly, testing the words. "Tell me, Seth, what real work have you done lately?
Who's talking about you?
Who's buying tickets to see you? I disappear for 8 months and return to the biggest pop of the year. You show up every week and can't even trend on Twitter." The verbal assault was surgical, designed to cut deeper than any physical attack. Seth's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists, but before he could respond, Roman waved him away dismissively. "You're dismissed. Go do your real work. I'll be up here, making history." The parade continued. Drew McIntyre, LA Knight, Gunther, each top star called to account for their place in Roman's WWE. Some played along, understanding the promotional value. Others resisted, creating tension that felt increasingly real. The line between work and shoot became so blurred that even experienced wrestlers in the back couldn't quite tell where one ended and the other began. That's when Roman revealed his true intention, and the wrestling world experienced its second massive shock in less than a month. "I'm not here to judge you," Roman finally said, standing from his throne for the first time all night. "I'm here to offer you a choice. Join the bloodline and share in the power, the money, the legacy. Or stand against me and be crushed like everyone else who's tried." The offer hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Was Roman trying to expand the bloodline beyond his family? The implications were staggering. An all-encompassing faction that controlled WWE from top to bottom? It would be unprecedented in modern wrestling. Drew McIntyre shocked everyone by stepping forward first. The Scottish warrior, who had built his career on independence and self-reliance, looked at Roman with an expression that was difficult to read. "I've fought you, I've lost you, I've beaten you," Drew said slowly. "And I'm smart enough to know that fighting a war on principle, when you could be winning, is just stupid pride. If the offer's real, I'm in." The crowd erupted in boos so loud they shook the building. Drew had been a fan favorite, a hero, and here he was selling out to the man they loved to hate. But the Real nuclear bomb dropped when the lights went out one final time. When they came back up, standing next to Drew McIntyre was Cody Rhodes. The American Nightmare, WWE's hand-picked top babyface, the man who represented everything pure and good about professional wrestling, stood shoulder to shoulder with Drew, both men staring at Roman with an intensity that could melt steel. The confusion in the arena was palpable. This couldn't be happening. Cody wouldn't turn. Not after everything he'd built. Not after his father's legacy. Not after finally achieving his dream of being WWE champion. Except he was. Cody took the microphone from a shell-shocked announcer and spoke words that would be replayed millions of times over the next few days. "My father taught me a lot of things," Cody began, his voice different somehow, harder. "But the most important lesson he never intended to teach was this: loyalty and legacy don't pay the bills. Sentiment doesn't put you in the main event of WrestleMania. Roman Reigns does. So here I am, making a choice that's about more than pride or principle. I'm choosing to win." The arena descended into chaos. Fans threw drinks, signs, anything they could get their hands on. The boos were deafening, a wall of sound so intense it seemed to physically push against the performers in the ring. But amidst the chaos, Roman Reigns stood calm, his bloodline now expanded to include some of WWE's biggest names. The tribal chief raised his fist, and Cody, Drew, the Usos, Solo, and Jacob all raised theirs in unison. The image was striking, powerful, and deeply unsettling. Commentary was losing their minds. Michael Cole's voice cracked as he tried to process what was happening. "I can't believe what we're seeing." Cody Rhodes, the man who ended Roman's reign. The man who represented hope for everyone who opposed the bloodline. He's joined them. Corey Graves, typically the heel commentator, was speechless for perhaps the first time in his career. Even he hadn't seen this coming. Nobody had. Roman had done it again, pulled off another twist that rewrote the entire landscape of WWE. Backstage, the locker room watched in stunned silence. Some wrestlers were angry, feeling betrayed by Cody's decision. Others were calculating, wondering if they should reach out to Roman before someone else took their spot. The politics of WWE had completely shifted in the span of 2 hours. Alliances that had existed for years were suddenly meaningless. Everyone was either with the bloodline or against them, and the latter option looked increasingly foolish. Social media experienced its third meltdown in a month. Cody turned trended #1 worldwide within minutes. Fans recorded themselves having genuine emotional breakdowns, some crying, others screaming at their televisions. Wrestling hadn't made people feel this intensely in years, maybe decades. The fact that the emotions were negative, that fans felt betrayed and angry, didn't matter to WWE's bottom line. They were engaged, invested, and they'd tune in next week to see what happened, even if only to boo. But here's where Roman's genius truly revealed itself. Over the next 2 weeks, cryptic vignettes began airing. Cody and Drew appeared in shadows, speaking in riddles about the greater plan and the long game. They referenced Roman's 8-month absence, suggesting there were still layers to this story that hadn't been revealed. The internet went wild with speculation. Were Cody and Drew actually double agents? Were they infiltrating the bloodline from within? Or were fans so desperate to believe their heroes weren't really villains that they were creating conspiracy theories out of thin air? The answer came at the go-home show before the next pay-per-view. Roman stood in the ring with his expanded bloodline, cutting a promo about his complete dominance over WWE. The entire show had been built around the bloodline's power, with Roman and his allies beating down anyone who dared oppose them. The announce team had painted a picture of complete hopelessness, a company under the boot of a tyrant with no hero in sight to save it. That's when every light in the arena went out again. What happened next will be debated and discussed for years to come. When the lights returned, Cody Rhodes stood in the center of the ring holding a steel chair. Roman lay on the mat, clearly dazed. The Usos were down outside the ring. Solo and Jacob were nowhere to be seen. And standing on the entrance ramp with a smile that could light up the darkest night was Drew McIntyre, holding both the Universal Championship and Roman's sacred Ula Fala, the lei that symbolized tribal chief status. The arena exploded with cheers so loud they could be heard blocks away. Cody hadn't turned. It had all been a work within a work, a triple cross that used Roman's own tactics against him. The past 2 weeks of cryptic promos hadn't been meaningless. They'd been breadcrumbs for those smart enough to follow them. Cody and Drew had infiltrated the bloodline, gained Roman's trust just enough to get close, and then struck at the perfect moment. The storytelling had come full circle, the student using the teacher's own methods to finally land a real blow. Or had they? Because as the show went off the air, as Cody and Drew celebrated in the ring to the loudest cheers imaginable, the camera caught something. Paul Heyman, standing in the shadows backstage, smiling. Not the smile of a man whose client had just been embarrassed. The smile of a man whose plan was proceeding exactly as designed. The camera held on Heyman for just 3 seconds, then cut to black, leaving millions of viewers with more questions than answers. The internet nearly broke for a 4th time. Had Roman known this would happen? Was this another layer in his grand design? Or had Cody and Drew genuinely outsmarted the tribal chief? WWE refused to clarify. No official statement was released. No insider reports leaked the truth. For once, a wrestling angle remained beautifully, maddeningly ambiguous. Fans argued with each other, broke down every frame of footage, analyzed every word spoken over the past month. The speculation alone generated more publicity than any advertising campaign could have bought. Ratings for the next episode of Monday Night Raw broke records again. 5.3 million viewers tuned in, desperate for answers. What they got was Roman Reigns appearing via satellite, his face calm and unreadable. He didn't rant or rave. He didn't make threats or excuses. He simply said, "Did you really think it would be that easy?" before the feed cut out. Those 8 words created more discussion than most companies generate in a year. Wrestling had become unmissable again, and Roman Reigns was the reason why. The final image that will forever define this era appeared on social media 1 week after Cody's apparent betrayal of the bloodline. A photo, posted from an anonymous account, showed Roman, Cody, and Drew sitting at a table in what looked like a private restaurant. All 3 men were laughing. The photo's caption was simple: "The game never ends." Was it real? Photoshopped? A leak or intentional release? Nobody knew. Nobody knows. And that's exactly how Roman Reigns wanted it. Because in the end, the greatest trick Roman Reigns ever pulled wasn't making the wrestling world believe he was gone when he wasn't. It wasn't orchestrating the most elaborate return in professional wrestling history. It wasn't even creating a storyline so complex it blurred the lines between reality and fiction. The greatest trick was making everyone understand that with Roman Reigns, you never really know what's real and what's part of the show. And in professional wrestling, that level of uncertainty is pure, uncut, addictive gold. The tribal chief had returned. WWE would never be the same. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, Roman Reigns was already planning his next move in a game that would apparently never end. The only question remaining wasn't whether fans would tune in to see what happened next. The question was whether they could afford not to.